Hello class and welcome to our online lesson on ecology. Now I want to start this lesson off with a riddle. What is the only chain that can be eaten? What do you think? Metal chain? Chain reaction? Well, the answer is a food chain. Haha, isn't that funny? Well, even if you didn't think that was funny, today's topic will be on food chains. So we're going to be talking about what is a food chain, what is a food web. You probably know some of these things from primary school. But we're going to be looking at it deeper, introducing to you new terms such as what a trophic level is. So stay tuned and stay focused in preparation for the next lesson. So what is a food chain? Well, essentially it is a series of feeding relationships. So it shows you which organism feeds on another. So just looking at the example down here, you can see that this plant is eaten by this grasshopper, which is eaten by this rat or mouse, eaten by this snake, which is eaten by this eagle or kite, some sort of predatory bird. But more importantly, besides feeding relationships, it actually shows us the transfer of energy. Right? It's not just about food or eating, it's about energy being transferred from one organism to another. So we see here that energy ultimately comes from the sun, right? And then our plants take in sunlight, they convert the light energy into chemical energy through photosynthesis, which we'll talk about later. That energy then is passed on, right? From organism to organism, energy is passed on. So these arrows here, they represent the transfer of energy from one organism to another. Now this new term here, trophic level, it refers to the position of an organism in the food chain. So for example, this plant, its trophic level is a producer. This grasshopper's trophic level is a primary consumer. It is what feeds on the producer. Then this mouse, he is a secondary consumer, which feeds on the primary consumer. And then finally, the tertiary consumer feeds on the secondary consumer. And anything beyond the tertiary consumer, we usually just call it a tertiary consumer. So then this new word, trophic level, okay, we don't just talk about herbivore or carnivore anymore. We talk about producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, and tertiary consumer. So as I've already mentioned on the previous slide, the trophic level is an organism's position in a food chain. And there are 4 different types of trophic level depending on which position you are at. Producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, and tertiary consumer. See, it's a bit like your primary school, secondary school, and whatever comes after. So I want you to try this exercise here. We have this food web, which is basically made up of many food chains. I want you to spot at least 3 food chains. And I want you to be able to name in that food chain what the producer is, what the primary consumer is, and the secondary consumer. So try it, pause the video, and try it for yourself for a while. Alright, I hope that you managed to find a food chain. So I'm just going to show one example, which involves the berries, right, which are eaten by the titmouse, whatever that is, this kind of bird, guess, then the snake, right, and finally the buzzard. Right, so hopefully you would call, what's this, you would know that not by now that this berries, we call it the producer, right? The titmouse, what do we call it? Yes, the primary consumer, because it feeds on the producer. Then the snake, which eats the titmouse, the secondary consumer. And finally, the buzzard, we call it the tertiary consumer. Okay, so I want you to do that for another 2 food chains before moving on, just to make sure that you've got that in your heads. But even as we're talking about organisms and food chains, I wonder if you're thinking of this question. Why do organisms feed on one another anyway? Why does this Arctic cat, which we call a lynx, feed on this Arctic rabbit, Arctic hare? Why does it do that? Right? Why do we see such behavior in nature? And really the answer is that it's all about energy. Right? Organisms have to feed on other organisms to obtain energy. And I'm sorry to cut off that very exciting video, but we're going to be talking now about how the organisms get energy. So like what we saw, if you're an animal, usually what you would do is you would eat some other animal, right? Or eat some other plant. So animals eat other organisms and then digest them. And when they digest and break them down, they manage to obtain these energy-rich molecules, carbohydrates. You might have seen this on your food labels. Carbohydrates, for example, glucose, sugar, starch, right? We get all these things from the food that we eat. So animals eat other organisms, digest them to obtain energy-rich molecules. Plants, on the other hand, don't have to eat other organisms. We know that through photosynthesis, which the plant uses energy from the sun, plants are able to then make their own energy-rich molecules. Plants can make their own sugar, make their own glucose. But whether or not you're a plant or an animal, you still need another step to get energy from these energy-rich molecules. And that step is called respiration. Now, respiration is a process that takes place inside every organism, inside the cells of every organism, which help to release the energy which is stored inside these food energy-rich molecules. So you can have lots of glucose. The plants can make lots of glucose. Animals can make lots of glucose and carbohydrates all stored up inside. But in order to release the energy, you need respiration. In our next few slides, we're going to be learning about what photosynthesis and respiration are. So in the rest of this lesson, we're just going to be looking quickly at what photosynthesis and respiration are. So photosynthesis, as you might already know from primary school, is a process where plants produce sugars, so those energy-rich molecules like glucose, from carbon dioxide in the air and water which they absorb from the ground, and importantly in the presence of light energy. So if we put this into an equation form, what we call a word equation, right, which you guys need to know, okay, carbon dioxide and water are reacted together, combined together to form sugars. So glucose is the sugar, and there's also oxygen that is produced in photosynthesis. So carbon dioxide plus water, which we call the reactants, okay, which is a bit like the ingredients of the reaction, what you start with, become glucose and oxygen, which we call the products, right? What you produce, the products. And in the middle, we have light, right? Light is a condition. So the reactants, carbon dioxide and water, become the products, glucose and oxygen, when there is light. And you see another condition here, chlorophyll. Now, chlorophyll is a special pigment in the leaves of plants, is what makes the leaves green, which is needed to absorb light energy. So without chlorophyll, plants cannot absorb light and they cannot photosynthesize. Alright, so just get your head around this equation. You'll need to know it. Now, the other process that you need to know very well is this process called respiration. And it is the process, like I said already, to release energy stored in energy-rich molecules like glucose. So the process of using oxygen to release energy. So for example, this sandwich here probably contains a lot of glucose, a lot of energy-rich molecules. But in order to release and to, in a sense, unleash that energy, you need oxygen. Oxygen is here. So we combine oxygen with glucose inside you, and you produce energy. You release the energy out together with carbon dioxide and water, which are also produced in the process. So here's the equation for it, right? Glucose, right? Your energy-rich glucose is combined with oxygen, reacts with oxygen to produce carbon dioxide and water, and of course, your energy is also released. Okay, but I don't normally put energy as a product. We put it as something at the side. The energy is also released. So again, these are our reactants, and carbon dioxide and water are our products. Now, one thing to note is that in respiration, you don't always get all the energy from glucose released properly. Some energy does get lost as heat, right? So not all the energy in glucose gets converted into useful energy for our activities, right? Some of that energy is lost as heat energy, and that's going to be really important later. So that's all for our lesson. I just really need you guys to go back and revise, right? What is the word equation for photosynthesis, the word equation for respiration? You need to know those really well by heart. Alright, see you.